So let's look at the battleground. Basically, we need to beware the three influencers in the battleground of the mind. Let's look at a couple verses in Ephesians 2. You used to live in sin, just like the rest of the world, obeying the devil, the commander of the powers of the unseen world. He is the spirit at work in the hearts of those who refuse to obey God. There is something going on there. All of us used to live that way, following the passionate desires and inclinations of our sinful nature. So he talks about being like the rest of the world, about following the devil and our own sinful nature. So it's called the world, the flesh, and the devil. The world, maybe you've heard that called the world, the flesh, and the devil. That's the three influences on our mind that we need to beware of, and we're going to look at them in that order. First, let's look at the world. The many outside influences in our world which try to affect our thinking or hinder our thinking. What I want to look at, just a few of these. All right, propaganda. And they say, what are you talking about? I'm saying somebody's got an agenda. Some politicians might have an agenda that is for themselves. I know you're surprised at that. And we need to pay attention to what they're saying and not swallow it whole. Some, and I think a lot of college professors have had an agenda of propaganda now. They're not just teaching reading, writing, and arithmetic. They've got an agenda, they've got a worldview, they've got an opinion, and they have an agenda to change the way college students think. We need to be careful about the propaganda and not just swallow that whole. Advertising. Now, I don't know, now that we've got DVR, I don't see that much advertising on TV, but you know what? It's everywhere else. It's all over the internet. It's everywhere. Advertising. And you know what? They're paying millions of dollars for ads on the Super Bowl next Sunday. Why? Because it works. They get us to buy stuff that we weren't going to buy. And we have to be careful of the influence of advertising. As the old saying says, we buy things we don't need with money we don't have to impress people we don't like. And it's so easy with Amazon, isn't it? Oh, look at that. That would make me happy. It shipped right to me. You know, and then we got... I'm not, online shopping is fine. I'm just saying we need to beware of advertising because America is filled with storage units or people storing stuff they don't need that they didn't need to buy. Now, I'm not judging your storage unit. Yours is needed stuff. But a lot of those other people have given to advertising. All right. The media. We don't just need to believe everything we see on TV. Read in a magazine, see on the internet. I know that's obvious, but somehow we still do it. We sit there almost with our mouths open and say, I heard it on the TV station. I saw it, and it must be true. I read it on the internet. And we're bombarded with these ideas and beliefs that even 20 years ago, people in America didn't believe, people in the world didn't believe. But now it's the new normal, and we're supposed to just accept it and believe it. And live it, and celebrate it. What brings happiness? Is there a God? Who created marriage, sex, all of this? Let me tell you this, the media has an agenda too because they are human beings with their own worldview, their own opinions, and we need to understand that. So we can be deceived by things we watch. And you know what they're so good at, the movies and TV, is getting our feelings. And feelings really affect us when they stir our emotions. But we have to learn to not just think with our feelings, but think with our brain. And match what we see on the movies and television with what God says. And not just accept it. Well, I know he lived like that, he talked this way, but he was a nice guy on the movie, you see. So we felt good about him, and we accepted it. We have to be careful about thinking with our feelings and accepting anything that comes. And I said it last week, and I say it again, fear is mass-produced in our nation today. FDR, do you remember what he said at the beginning of World War II? He said, let me believe belief, or say the belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Nameless, unreasoning, unjustified terror which paralyzes needed efforts. And that's what's happening to a lot today. People are just cranking out fear, 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 fear. Be afraid of everybody around you. Be afraid of everything's going to happen. Be afraid of the future. Be afraid of the present. And that is not from God. I'm going to talk more about that in a minute. And we need to be careful. I'm not saying don't be careful when it's an icy road. Don't even drive. I'm not talking about that. God doesn't want you to just act like it doesn't matter what I do. About disease or anything. I'm not saying that. But neither am I saying we need to live into fear, which gets people to watch. It gets us to watch. The headlines are there to cause us to be shook up and mad at somebody. We've got to watch out what's happening on that. All right. Porn. Now, I'm not going to get into a lot of this, but it is at epidemic levels in our world, in our country. Porn is. It is not good. It does not have good results. And we need it affects our marriages. In so many ways, I'm not going to take a lot of time, but I think it hinders our marriages. 56%, once a guy who did studies, 56% of divorces, one partner had an obsessive interest in porn. I'm not saying it's the only cause, but it has ridiculous expectations, and it leads you it doesn't satisfy. You got to get more and deeper until I don't get on it, but I tell you what I read about it. It is disgusting what is on porn today. It's not just a nice man and a nice woman kissing each other. Children, I mean, it's on and on. It gets to worse and worse because it doesn't satisfy. And we need to beware that influence in our heart and mind. And too much information. You say, what is that? I'm not talking about where somebody says, you shouldn't have told me all those personal details. That's too much information. I'm saying no. Well, there's just too much information in the world for us to process. I've heard it said that one issue of the New York Times contains more information than the average person in the Middle Ages would have heard in their whole life. One issue. We are overwhelmed with information. You can just sit there and if you weren't on a TV or Netflix, you could get on the internet and 24 hours a day get information and would never get enough. Now, I'm not saying it's bad that we have all this information. I'm saying how it affects us. So, since there's so much, and we know we can't deal with all of it, we don't have any deep thinking. We are all shallow thinkers, we're becoming more and more shallow thinkers. We only want the headlines. We only want the little snippets. We only want the labels. Somebody like, he's a good guy, all right. He's a bad guy. Oh, no, he's a bad guy. I heard somebody say he's a bad guy. We don't know why he's a bad guy. We didn't investigate it, but we can't deal with everything. And so we deal and judge and get our opinions from headlines and just snippets of information, and that's dangerous. So too much information can lead us to less deep thinking. We can't deep think about everything, but we need to make sure before we judge and make different changes, we listen to the whole story. Alcohol and other drugs affect our thinking. Obviously, I guess it's obvious that you don't think as well when you have an impairment of drugs or alcohol on you. And so we need to be careful with that. How many millions of people are getting their lives ruined by alcohol and drugs? Which is why I don't recommend you experiment with any of them. But they affect our thinking. Scientism. Now, what is scientism, you say? I'm glad you asked. Here's a picture of what scientism is. The guy's worshiping the test tube. You know, scientism is not science. It's more like the worship of science. And this one person put this definition. Science is empirical, quantitative. You know, it's this much, do this. You can test it. It's mechanical, self-correcting, and falsifiable. I can show whether it's true or false. And that's why you ask questions, to be self-correcting. And when somebody says, don't question the science, I want to say, do you know what science is? Science is you question it. Is this really right? And when somebody hears somebody on TV, I don't want you to question this, I don't want you to give a different opinion, that person's worried about it. They're worried about you believing something different, actually investigating it. It's almost a religion of science. Scientism instead of true science. See, I'm not against true science. Some people try to say religion and science are opposed. No, they're not. Science began, true science began the way it is by Christians, by people who believed in God. But when somebody says, don't question this, then you know, what are they hiding? Why do they want to silence it? Why do they want to censor that viewpoint and not let anybody ever even say it? Now, I'm talking about COVID, I'm talking about sex and gender, I'm talking about who created the world, all of these things. They don't want any other opinion. Scientists cannot tell you how the world got started. That is not science. And so when you hear scientists say, science has shown us that God didn't create the world, you know they're not telling the truth. They don't know that. That's scientism. So we need to understand there is a difference between science and scientism. I believe in science. It's something we can measure and test. I don't believe in people silencing the other viewpoint or saying you can't ask any questions or science has all the answers. It cannot give you all the answers. Let me move on, please. Experts. What? I thought that's who we're supposed to listen to. Well, I'm not saying, and I always have to clarify this, what I'm not saying. I'm not saying don't listen to people who've investigated and studied more. That's who I want to listen to. I want to listen to somebody who's done this, who's studied this. You know, I do want to listen to them. The problem is there's experts who believe this, and then there's experts who believe this. And you get to quote which expert you want. Because every expert is a what? A human being. Which means they have their own opinions, their own framework, their own worldview, and their own agenda. And we have to be careful. This is more important now in this day than I think any day in human history, how we think and what we listen to. We can't just listen. So I'm saying we have to do more to get the soundbite from an expert that this person puts out, or this person puts out. Somehow we have to take, if it's something we're really interested in, we need to investigate more. What are the experts really saying? One of these days, I want to take a whole time and just look at headlines, what the story really is. Because the headline leads you astray sometimes from what the story really is. And the experts quote sometimes, when you really look at the story and get it, it's not what they're saying in the headlines. So I'm saying we have to be careful of just quoting some expert. I'm not saying all experts are wrong. I'm saying they may tell you the part of the story they want to tell you and leave out the part they don't want to tell you. And that, again, could be on a lot of different issues. But let me give you one quote I did find out. This is from Jen Hatmaker, supposedly a Christian woman. She says, when white, mostly male, straight, married, able-bodied people with a certain threshold of money and power are at the center of the narrative, we will never correctly identify good fruit. Privilege is a reliable enemy of discernment. Now think in your mind whether you like that quote or not. And here's what I say. Jen Hatmaker is all of those things except for me. So we can't trust her either. Why should we trust that quote? She says that's not reliable for discernment, which is what she is. When we start labeling which who we can lead, so I guess what we need is a Hispanic woman who is crippled. I don't even know if that's a good word or not. I hope I didn't use a bad word, but who has problems physically, and say that's the only person, if she's poor. That's nonsense! To say these are the only people we can listen to. Let me tell you something about black people. Some of them are liars and some of them tell the truth. Let me tell you something about white people. Some of them are liars and some of them tell you the truth. Let me tell you something about men and women. Some men are true and some men are liars. Some women are good and some are not. It's not just a label kind of thing. And let's get a little discernment in our brains and not just swallow and say, well, I guess that's what it is. I'm getting a little upset and I'm trying not to. I actually prayed that. Lord, help me. The fact checkers need fact checkers. Is all I'm saying, because they are human too and they have an agenda. I have an agenda and opinion. Check me out. Get in the Bible and other things. Check me out. I hope you do. So we need to beware the experts. All right. So that's the end of point 1.